Hey folks, tonight we slip past the borders of the history books and drift into an older tale, one buried in dust, whispered in forgotten languages, and painted on the walls of caves beneath the earth. Imagine a world where humans were not yet the masters, where the sky shimmered with golden ships and the ground hummed with the echo of feet that were not quite ours. Maybe you're wrapped in a blanket in Boston, or listening quietly in Nairobi, or tucked in somewhere under the Tokyo skyline. Wherever you are, drop a comment with your location and your local time. We're traveling tonight, and I'd love to know who's along for the ride. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Once, long before alphabets and agriculture, a tale began, but not with us. Before humans, something else lived here. Something intelligent, something powerful, and something that didn't want to share. Across the ancient world, the oldest stories whisper of a time before mankind, when the earth belonged to another race, beings of fire and wind, of shadow and brilliance. Call them the first ones, the Igigi, or simply the Watchers. Some texts call them gods, others angels, and a few, well, they say they were our ancestors' enemies. In the Mesopotamian cradle, Sumerian scribes chiseled legends into clay, speaking of sky-born rulers whose reigns stretched 28,000 years or more. And these weren't just poetic exaggerations. The Sumerian king list methodically tallied their reigns with eerie precision. Names like Alulim and Alalgar, each ruling for tens of thousands of years, echoed across stone tablets. It was as if they were recording, not imagining. And what do you do when your rulers live forever and command the stars? You serve them. The earliest myths say humans were created to work, to dig, to farm, to worship. In some versions, we're called the black-headed ones. In others, merely workers of clay. Our birth, according to Atrahasis and Enuma Elish, wasn't romantic. It was functional. Our ancestors were made to lift the burden of the gods. In those myths, the gods aren't floating spirits. They walk, they argue, they eat often quite messily, and they mine. Yes, mine, specifically for gold. One can't help but raise an eyebrow at that. Why gold? Because of its conductivity? Its reflective beauty? Or maybe, as the legend implies, for something a bit more atmospheric. Some claim it was used to repair their home planet's damaged environment. Nibiru, they called it. A wandering world on a 3,600-year elliptical orbit. Think of it as a shy cousin in the solar family, peeking in every few millennia. Now imagine this. Massive ships descending from the skies into the waters of the Persian Gulf, setting up the first Earth base. That base was Eridu, known as the first city in human history, archaeologically real, spiritually loaded. They came not just as miners, but as rulers. Think of Enki, the engineer, and Enlil, the enforcer. Sibling rivalry, divine addition. They had different visions for Earth and for us. One saw potential, the other saw a nuisance. And in the middle of this interstellar family drama, humans were born. Or perhaps assembled. Some stories say we were created from the blood of a rebellious god mixed with clay. Bloody, symbolic, and oddly surgical. But before you get too cozy, here's the kicker. Earth wasn't empty. According to Islamic tradition and ancient Near Eastern lore, it had previous tenants, the jinn, beings of smokeless fire, fast, unseen, and possibly resentful. Some scholars whisper that the original battle wasn't between man and nature, but between man and what came before. Imagine being dropped into a world already claimed, already filled with rules you didn't write. A guest in a palace you didn't build. That's the human condition in these ancient myths. We weren't the heroes, we were the interns. And not even the paid kind. And yet, here we are, the humans, the survivors. The last species standing. Of course, this story is just beginning. Because as we'll soon see, There's a reason these ancient tales all start the same way, with paradise, pride, and the fall. But that's the next layer. Now that we've touched down on Earth and met our celestial supervisors, let's take a quiet step into the moment everything began to unravel, when paradise was lost, not by accident, but by design. You know the story, or at least you've heard echoes of it. A lush garden, a curious pair, a serpent, and a fall. But tonight, we go deeper. Not into the garden itself, but into what was behind the expulsion. Because this isn't just a tale of fruit and disobedience. It's a tale of betrayal, defiance, and a divine game of musical chairs where the prize was Earth itself. So here's the setup. Humanity, freshly minted from the blood and clay cocktail, is placed in an ideal realm. Let's call it the original domain. This isn't quite heaven, not quite Earth. A midpoint, a testing ground. In Islamic tradition, this realm is often interpreted as a garden. Yes, but also a dimension where divine presence was more immediate, tangible. But not everyone was thrilled about us. Enter Azazel, or as he's later known, Iblis, a being of fire who had risen through the ranks of the divine. Not an angel, not exactly a jinn, but something in between. He held a Malik status, a divine rank, not necessarily a species. Think of Melek as a title, not a creature, like captain on a spaceship. And Azazel? He wanted command. But then came the command, bow to Adam. And Azazel said, softly but coldly, no. That single word shattered 1,000 cosmic expectations. Pride burned hotter than fire, and Azazel was cast down, not alone, but with others who shared his view. And they didn't land lightly. Their fall echoed across mythologies. In Judaism, Christianity, Islam, even in the stormy poems of the Mahabharata and the icy chants of Nordic lore. But it didn't end there. Because Earth, it turns out, was not just a prison, it was a battleground. The divine decree separated species. Jinn went to their place. Humans went to ours. Contact was forbidden. But of course, it didn't stay that way. Azazel wasn't just bitter. He was strategic. He set a plan in motion. And that plan began with a secret rendezvous. He found an ally in Semyaza, a name that pops up in ancient Jewish texts like the Book of Enoch. Semyaza wasn't a low-level rebel. He was a leader, a fallen commander of Watchers. Together, they made a pact atop Mount Hermon, a mountaintop thick with legends, storms, and secrets. Their goal? To cross the line that had been drawn between the realms. Here's where things turn from spiritual to strangely genetic. Semyaza and his companions descended to Earth, not as conquerors with swords, but as teachers. But these weren't the kinds of lessons you'd find in your 5th grade classroom. They taught humans how to manipulate metals, how to brew potions, how to wield charms and rituals that cracked open the boundaries of the natural world. Alchemy, sorcery, weaponry. But perhaps most dangerous of all, they taught seduction. A union took place. Not metaphorical, not symbolic. Literal unions. The fallen ones interbred with humans. And the offspring? Giants. Titans. In the Hebrew texts, they're called Nephilim. In other cultures, Anakim, or the children of Anak. And in Turkish folklore, well, you may have heard of Anuk Oklu Uc, the towering figure who could carry firewood on his head and crush men like ants. One charming bedtime image, right? These beings were powerful, long-lived, and utterly ungovernable. They disrupted the balance. Their knowledge wasn't filtered through wisdom. Their might wasn't tempered with empathy. And soon, Earth, already a fragile experiment, was becoming something monstrous. But let's not lose the thread. All this began because humanity was seen as unworthy. Because someone believed we should not exist. And yet, we existed. We thrived, we adapted, and we fell. Like our celestial ancestors, we too disobeyed. We too learned what we shouldn't have. And perhaps in that strange mirror, we saw something true. That the real danger wasn't knowledge, it was who gave it, and why. Some say this is where the pattern begins. A cycle: creation, rebellion, exile, and punishment, over and over. Different names, same arcs. And behind it all, the quiet idea that maybe we were never alone, and never fully in control. But don't worry, next comes the flood. And that's when things really get dramatic. Let's glide forward, deeper into the shadows where myth and memory blur. The forbidden line has been crossed. Humans and the fallen ones, those strange shimmering beings of higher origin, have commingled. And Earth? Earth has become a melting pot of power, rebellion, and secrets whispered across dimensions. What came next wasn't a simple punishment. It was an emergency protocol, cosmic, sweeping, and unforgettably wet. But we're not quite at the flood yet. Before that, the story unfolds into a strange classroom, a twilight age of forbidden lessons and whispered tech. Imagine a world where beings from the stars or the heavens, if you like, taught humans the secret names of the elements. Not just their uses, but their natures. They taught how to carve stone in ways we still don't fully understand. How to summon things best left unsummoned. They offered knowledge wrapped in mystery, with a little side of mayhem. One might call it enlightenment. Another might call it sabotage. Take the tale of Harat and Marut, for example. In Islamic lore, these two were angels sent to Earth, not to party, but to test humanity. But instead of passing with flying halos, they too were lured by desire by a beautiful woman named Zur. One drink turned into one mistake. That turned into a child. That turned into a tragedy. So much for divine immunity. This isn't just about romantic entanglements and glittery wings, though. It's about what was taught. The texts say Harat and Marut taught human sorcery, astrology, the art of unlocking the unseen. And what began as curiosity quickly turned to chaos. Meanwhile, the Semyaza faction didn't exactly sit still. Their children, the Nephilim, the giants, spread. They weren't just big. They were rulers, warriors, tyrants. And with size came ego, and with ego came disaster. There are chilling echoes of this across ancient texts. The Hebrew Book of Enoch paints these giants as destroyers, teaching humans war, domination, blood sacrifice. In other words, the fallen ones weren't just building a society. They were breaking one down. And remember that name? Anak-Oklu Yusi? Turkish lore describes him as a mountain of a man, over 3,000 years old, with the strength to carry logs like toothpicks and a lifespan that would make vampires jealous. He wasn't alone. Tales like his exist across cultures, from the Og of the Torah to the Rakshasas of India. These were not bedtime cuddle monsters. They were destroyers of balance. The humans, meanwhile, learned fast. Too fast. They used their new knowledge to fashion weapons, build fortresses, and dominate one another. Bloodline mingled with bloodline, and the lines between mortal and divine, flesh and fire, blurred to the point of collapse. If Earth were a cosmic petri dish, it had become overgrown, infected with an ambition that wasn't supposed to be there. And so came the decision. A whisper passed through the higher realms. It's time to wash it all away. But we're not at the water's edge just yet. First, imagine the panic. The Watchers knew what was coming. Enoch, yes, that Enoch was warned. In some tellings, he was taken up to bear witness to the decisions made on high. He begged for mercy for the giants. The answer? A thunderous no. Because mercy had been given, and they had laughed in its face. And here's where it gets strange. Some traditions claim a few of the fallen ones tried to save their children. They taught them how to hide, how to escape. A few say they boarded ships, yes, ships, and vanished into the oceans or skies. Others claim they burrowed into the earth, waiting, always waiting. Even stranger? Not all the humans were innocent either. Some had become apprentices to the fallen, priests of forbidden's rites. They didn't want the world cleansed. But the flood was coming, not as a punishment for a single act, but as a purge for an entire era. And here's a soft little twist of irony. The very beings who once considered humans as inferior were now trying to cling to them, mix with them, even survive through them. The plan to replace the Watchers with humans had backfired spectacularly. And now both sides, heavenly and human, were about to face the first true reset. But before the water rises, one figure needs to build a boat. And we'll meet him in the next quiet wave of this journey. A soft mist hovers over the dawn-lit plains as the survivors, few humans and even fewer, Watchers peek over the horizon where once stood titans. Now, only echoes remain. But before those echoes faded, there was an age dominated by giants who strode across valleys like living shadows, their footsteps rolling like distant thunder. Imagine waking in a wooden lean-to to the roar of a 30-foot-tall Nephilim warlord calling out for breakfast. Most of us hit snooze on an alarm clock, but in that world, alarm clocks were the giants thunderous, impatient, and armed with obsidian-tipped spears. One sneeze from them might have leveled a hut. One expectant groan could topple a grove of trees. They weren't mythological mascots. They were the ruling elite, the offspring of Forbidden's unions. These giants, called Nephilim in Hebrew, Anakim in Jewish lore, and Rakshasas in Indian epics, existed to assert dominance. Their lifespan averaged centuries. They trained in war from birth, their lessons taught by veterans of celestial conflicts. If you were human, you served at their table, farmed for their flocks, and watched in stunned awe as they drew constellations on the sky with flaming arrows that burned but never consumed. A lullaby, then, would have sounded like this. Hush now, for Polius the Tall walks near. Do not wander into his shadow, lest you vanish. And indeed, vanish was often the outcome for trespassers. These beings took delight in displays of strength-lifting boulders, tossing chariots like toys, and wrestling lions barehanded. Their laughter echoed through canyons long after they left. But it wasn't all blood and bravado. Some giants became patrons of knowledge. They assembled libraries of engraved stone tablets, cataloging secrets from metallurgy to medicine. Under their watch, cities of polished stone and soaring ziggurats rose, supervised by giant architects and built by trembling human workers. Yet the giants' grandest legacy was their inhuman hubris. They believed themselves destined to replace even the gods. In the Mahabharata, the Rakshasas challenge Indra's throne. In the Book of Enoch, giants plot to storm the heavenly realms. One can almost hear their booming chants. Why fear the one above when we are stronger? This arrogance set the stage for their downfall. A scholar might note the irony. A race born of divine human union sought to outdo divinity itself. They hoarded weapons fashioned from meteorite iron, brewed potions to mask mortality's sting, and reared beast-like servants bound by dark pacts. The giants fractured into rival houses, some loyal to the Watcher's original vision, others bent on conquest. Their wars were epic, stone-throwing contests that flattened hillsides, flaming arrows that etched scorch marks into mountain faces, and massive war chariots drawn by six-legged griffons. Through it all, humans were pawns and cannon fodder, pressed into endless campaigns they barely understood. And yet, for all their power, giants harbored fear. They knew the flood was coming. They saw it in the changing skies, clouds roiling with unnatural colors, seas stirring without wind. Some giants pleaded with their Watcher fathers Dano, in Ugarit texts as one name whispered to intercede. Some even carved secret caves to hide in, marking them with pictograms meant to guide descendants through the deluge. But panic breeds mistakes. A giant named Og, king of Basharn, attempted to build a sky-piercing tower as a refuge. Legend says he carved a staircase to heaven, only to be struck down by a bolt of lightning, or perhaps by the gods themselves. His collapse sent shockwaves, toppling neighboring ramparts and stamping fear into the hearts of every giant. They realized the power that created them could unmake them. In hushed tones, then, they prepared. Some stole away in hidden barges, laden with prized treasures and forbidden scrolls. Others sought the highest peaks, Mount Ararat, Mount Hermon, even the ridges of Taurus and Anatolia, believing altitude might grant immunity. But none could outrun the waters. And so, as the first drops fell, these colossal beings stood atop their stone citadels, roaring defiance at a sky that swallowed their shouts. Water gushed through open gates. Walls cracked under hydrostatic pressure. A few giants waded into deeper channels, fully aware that the struggle was futile. By the next dawn, most had perished beneath waves that measured like mountain tides. Those who survived slipped away into legend-mysterious shadows, glimpsed in remote canyons, petrified footprints etched in rock, and tales of giants hidden in the deep forests, where they linger still, waiting for a time after the waters recede. For us humans, a giant's fall was both liberation and trauma. Suddenly, we stood on a blank slate, gazing at a world cleansed by water, but scarred in memory. The once dreaded job foremen were gone. The oppressive enforcement of forced labor ended. But so did access to the giants' libraries, their divine technologies, and their arcane rituals. We learned that power unchecked consumes itself. And as we trudged through muddy plains, our minds heavy with awe and fear, one thought lingered. Earth had been a proving ground, a petri dish. And perhaps the last thing the gods learned was that their hybrid experiment nearly swallowed them whole. All that remains now are myths whispered at campfires, and carvings half erased by time. But in those stories, the giants live on, not just as monsters, but as warnings etched in our collective soul. The reign began not with a whisper, but with a distant drum alow, relentless cadence that seemed to rise from the very heart of the earth. At first, it was easy to dismiss as an ordinary squall, the kind that drenches fields and rattles loose shutters. But this storm was different. The air tasted of salt and brimstone, and winds howled as if heralding an unstoppable tide. Every creature, from the tiniest beetle to the last surviving giant in its hidden valley, felt the shift. By midday, the skies had darkened beyond any storm I've ever seen, and I've seen a few in my time. Clouds piled atop one another like a stacked fortress, blotting out the sun. Winds buffeted ancient oaks until their leaves tore free in hunks. Rivers grew fangs, bursting banks and flooding farmlands. Streams transformed into rapids, carving new canyons through soft soils. But the true beginning was subtle. A single drop, then two, three slid down every face. Farmers lashed carts to oxen, praying they might outrun the worst. Children huddled in doorways, wide-eyed. Priests and shamans raised their voices in both fear and supplication. And all the while, the giants, those towering children of celestial ambition, stood clustered on high ground, roaring skyward in defiance. Few humans dared approach them, but those who did reported seeing tears in giant eyes, reflections of both regret and resignation. Some giants raised massive arms, as if pleading for mercy. Others simply stared, frozen in silent awe. Within hours, the sea itself seemed to rise, pushing salt water through coastal towns. Villages along the Tigris and Euphrates found their fields submerged beneath brackish water. Those who fled inland discovered that the land had turned to a muddy quagmire. Each step felt like wading through liquid earth. Then came the waterfalls. Great sheets of water cascading from impossibly high places. Cliffs that had never borne a stream now trembled under liquid weight. Wells overflowed. Caves became deep, flooded chambers, echoing with trapped screams of terror. Even the underground layers the watchers had carved collapsed under hydrostatic pressure, burying scrolls and secrets in murky voids. Some say the deluge was selective. In one valley, accounts describe a narrow ridge that remained dry, a cryptic safe zone where a handful of humans and a single watcher, Enoch, stood as witnesses. Enoch wasn't chosen for his heroism or wisdom. He was chosen because he had never faltered in his loyalty to justice. Prophets say he walked right up to the threshold between genres, watching, documenting, and stepping into a vessel prepared for him and his small family by the very gods who unleashed the flood. This ark was no simple boat. Think of a steel-trimmed behemoth, built with divine blueprints, compartments for every creature, stores of seeds, clay tablets inscribed with the history of the Watchers. And sure enough, as the waters rose, Enoch loaded the ark with his family, selected pairs of beasts, and tucked the last of the giant's secret scrolls into a hidden chamber. Meanwhile, elsewhere on the plains, humans fought the waters with shovels and prayers, but the flood paid no heed. Entire towns vanished in hours. Fields of grain drowned in knee-high water and disappeared under deeper waves within days. The storm lasted 40 days and nights, an echo of the cosmic cycle, repeating across mythologies far beyond Mesopotamia. Legends of this flood ripple through every culture. The Mahabharata speaks of Manu building a boat to survive the world deluge. The Quran recounts Noah's painstaking construction of the ark at divine command. Even Norse sagas murmur of watery apocalypses and survivors who rode out the storm in makeshift vessels, clutching to wooden hulls while the world washed away. When the 40 days ended, a hush fallen like a held breath, the waters did not immediately recede. They lingered, leveling mountains, bearing icebergs through subtropical latitudes. The sun, starved of sight for so long, hung weakly in a hazy sky. Then, as if responding to some unseen command, the waters began to withdraw. Valleys emerged, littered with flotsam and desperate tracks. Carcasses of beasts and giants lay strewn like broken statues. Forests were uprooted, leaving stumps poking from silent lakes. The air smelled of peat and decay, with a tang of salt on every breeze. Enoch's ark came to rest on a mountain peak, traditionally said to be Mount Ararat, though some traditions cite the peaks of Lebanon or the Taurus Range. When he opened the hatch, a world of ruin greeted him, a tapestry of mud, shattered stone, and the faint cries of survivors emerging from caves. He released Raven's first watchers in their own right to scout the land. Doves followed, each returning with a fragment, a twig, an olive leaf, a single drop of fresh water. Gradually, the survivors descended. Groggy humans, their clothes tattered, animals frightened but alive, and Enoch's family, carrying tablets that held the last unbroken narratives of the Watchers. The giants' bloodlines had been nearly erased. Only a handful lingered, half-buried in legends rather than flesh. And yet, the world's whisper remained. Remember. Not vengeance, but remembrance. A cautionary note etched into every cracked tablet and whispered by every returning bird. For all its violence, the flood served a purpose: to wipe the slate clean, to replant humanity in a world free of unchecked power, and, perhaps most importantly, to hide what had come before. In the drenched aftermath, survivors found that the secrets were no longer safe in open valleys. So they buried them writing on clay, sealing tablets in underground vaults, painting glyphs that would hint at the past but not give it away. And some, those who still trusted the giant's promise of return, carved maps leading to hidden caches, waiting for the day when a new generation would reopen the doors. So when later scribes, Sumerians, Babylonians, Hebrews recorded the flood stories, they each carried a fragment of the original. The numbers change, the names shift, but the core remained: a world corrupted by Forbidden's power, a catastrophic reset by water, and a small vessel carrying the seed of a new beginning. Tonight, as you listen, imagine those muddy plains drying under a pale sun. Imagine historians of tomorrow, brushing off millennia-old tablets to piece together yesterday's lost world, and remember that our own modern age might one day seem just as ancient and as buried as theirs. When the waters finally withdrew, and the soggy earth sighed beneath the first hesitant footsteps of survivors, a hush fell over what remained of the world. Picture a vast plain mottled with half-buried ruins, collapsed ziggurats protruding like ancient ribs, shattered statues lying in pools of brackish water, and fields once lush now a tangle of driftwood and mud. In this quiet aftermath, the survivors' humans, a scattering of giants, and perhaps a lone watcher or two stepped into a cleansed but alien landscape. The survivors clustered in small bands, tents pitched on higher ground or in the lee of broken stone walls. Everyone wore the same expression, a mix of awe at their survival and an almost unbearable weight at what they'd lost. Seeds, carefully stored in clay jars, were sown into the damp soil. Animals that had weathered the deluge tentative, trembling, were guided from the ark's lower compartments into makeshift pens. Yet human memory is a tricky thing. Without giants' libraries or watchers' council, knowledge began to fray at the edges. Crafts once practiced daily bronze smithing, star mapping, sacred rituals became rare. Survivors traded stories around fires, but as years passed, these tales stretched and faded. It's said that one old farmer, bent with age, would mimic the giants' roars to scare children away from the deep crevices where scrolls lay buried. In truth, those scrolls held the secrets to celestial mechanics, how to coax metals at the molecular level, how to inscribe protective wards, even the language of electric storms. A few survivors remembered more precisely. Among them, the descendants of Enoch's family keepers of the tablets wandered from settlement to settlement, offering glimpses of the old world in exchange for shelter and sustenance. Their leader, Methuselah, tall and gaunt, carried a cuneiform tablet under his arm like a talisman. Around him, his kin whispered the liturgies of before the flood, invoking names like Anu, Enki, and Tiamat. But most listeners, hungry for bread and warmth, nodded politely and returned to the new fields. It was in these scattered camps that the true secrets of the deluge began to crystallize into myth. A woman named Shamir spoke of meeting a lone Nephilim who'd survived by sealing himself in a buried temple, the walls inscribed with glowing symbols that repelled the floodwaters. When she described it to firelight-eyed elders, they shivered and scooped grains from her bowl, preferring flatbread to Forbidden's knowledge. Across the plains, another figure, Nabo, a scribe in a half-ruined city, carefully catalogued what he could salvage from library ruins. Clay tablets tumbled from shelves like broken teeth, each snapped shard a mystery. Nabo, his stylus stained with mud, taught himself to read the old script, finding formulas for metal purification and medicinal concoctions that could heal bone and sinew. He shared these remedies with ailing survivors, but hid the star mapping sections, worried that too much knowledge might invite another disaster. Meanwhile, rumors spread of hidden vaults deep beneath the hills, carved by watchers before the deluge. In Anatolia's ridges, a hunter named Layla discovered an entrance sealed by a massive stone door. She pried it open under moonlight, revealing a chamber lined with obsidian tablets. Their surfaces shimmered with a faint luminescence, an ancient technology born of both earth and celestial craft. Terrified yet entranced, Layla fled, vowing never to speak of what she'd seen. Over decades, these fragments fueled secret cults. Some worshipped the Watchers as saviors, awaiting their return in a golden ship. They gathered in caves, chanting invocations thought lost to time. Others, bitter and disillusioned, damned the Watchers and Giants, crediting them entirely for the world's suffering. They burned old tablets wherever they found them, believing ignorance was a safer inheritance. Yet one unspoken truth bound them all. This world was not ours alone to chart. The flood had been a cleansing, yes, but also a prison. Knowledge beyond a certain threshold had been banished beneath water and stone. To unearth it was to risk another cosmic backlash. And still, curiosity gnawed at the edges of human hearts. In the fertile delta where the Tigris meets the Euphrates, a small settlement arose, Eridu II, named after the fabled first city. Its founders were pragmatists. They dug wells, tilled soil, and built mud brick walls. But they made room for a sanctuary, a dome shaped like an inverted funnel, its plastered interior smooth and white. Within, priests whispered the primordial names in hushed reverence: Anu, Enlil, Enki. Once a year, on the anniversary of the flood's end, they conducted a silent vigil, leaving clay tablets and offerings at the sanctuary's central plinth. And so the world moved on. Children grew, curious about the stories their grandparents told, but impatient with clay and cuneiform. They preferred carving designs in wood, building simple contraptions, and watching stars without pondering their true origins. Generations sifted through the flood's legacy like sediment, preserving what made sense and discarding the rest. Yet beneath the new cities, beneath the rivers, the true history slumbered. Clay vaults held secrets of how to speak to the storm, of how to call forth lightning in your palms, of how to breathe in the whispers of the watchers. Some elders warned their children, do not dig too deep. Others, with a spark in their eyes, smiled and whispered, one day we will know again. Tonight, as you snuggle under your blanket, imagine the hush of that post-flood world. Think of those clustered survivors, ghosts of a past, cloaked in salt and ruin. Remember that every myth you've ever heard, every story of giants and gods, springs from this seam of memory, a seam cut open by water, then buried by time. Because some truths are too bright for the surface. They lie hidden, waiting for the brave or the foolish to unseal them once more. And when they do, the world will shift again, in ways we can only begin to imagine. In the wake of rivers sculpting new valleys and clay tablets half melted into mud, a spark of civilization flickered back to life. Imagine the hush before dawn, when soft golden light tiptoes across crumbling walls of an abandoned ziggurat Eridu, the second's grand predecessor, and you, a lone traveler, ascend its terraces to gaze upon a valley reborn. Here, humans once again looked skyward, not in fear, but with tentative hope. They saw stars glimmer like distant lanterns, and something ancient in their patterns seemed to whisper, we were here before you. From this hush emerged the Sumerian Kings List, a slender scroll penned generations after the flood. By candle flame, scribes meticulously recorded a lineage of rulers whose reigns stretched across unimaginable spans, tens of thousands of years, if you believe the numbers. Alulim, the first king, was said to have ruled 28,800 years. Alaugr, 36,000, and Nenluana, 43,200. Their combined age is unfathomable, a cosmic tick-tock measured in millennia. At first blush, you might suspect a scribe's ambitious fib after all. Your smartphone's battery life can't even last 12 hours without complaining. But these figures were repeated in multiple temple libraries and on clay fragments scattered from Kish to Nippur. Each tablet echoed the same astonishing truth. These rulers were not bound by ordinary time. Yet the list wasn't mere bragging rights. Embedded in its margins were hints of celestial origins. Next to Alulim's name, a tiny wedge symbol resembling a star flickered. Some tablets even sketched a simple orbit and elliptical path looping around circles representing Earth and the Sun. The signs, though crude, suggested these kings came from the skies, stepping off cosmic ships to govern our muddy world. The scribes used a term, mi, meaning divine decree or cosmic law, to describe each ruler's mandate. You might think of it as a heavenly appointment letter, stamped with the seal of Anu, Enlil, or Enki. When Mesgea Kasher ascended the throne, one tablet declares, by the Emmi of Enlil, 4,000 winters shall mark his reign. These weren't mere mortal lifespans. They were cosmic appointments, as if each king held a season ticket to Earth. One evening, priests gathered in the Temple of Anu to commemorate the accession of En-Men-Kau-Ana. They lit oil lamps scented with cedar, their flames dancing along reliefs of winged figures and horned crowns. A high priest intoned the liturgy. "Great King, you have crossed the cosmic waters. The Mi has chosen you to shepherd the black-headed people until the next cycle of Nibiru's return." And as incense smoke curled upward, it seemed to carry their voices into the empty sky. These Sumerian sky kings left more than names and years. They commissioned ziggurats that aligned with the star structure after stepped structure, pointing to constellations we still recognize as the bull, the lion, the scorpion. At summer solstice, sunlight pierced doorways, carved with the glyph of Marduk, signaling the renewal of cosmic order. You could almost hear excited whispers. "Look, the light touches his temple at dawn. He lives on through the sun." It must have felt like a daily callback message from the gods themselves. And there were artifacts too, small, egg-shaped stones inscribed with flight coordinates for Nibiru's next pass. Archaeologists in dreams, in the field, have found plano-convex lenses, polished, magnified distant objects, possibly used to track stellar movements. A few cylinders depict a vessel like a sleek, fish-curved, metallic, and leaping through waves of stars. Over time, these tablets and artifacts passed from temple to temple, sometimes erased, sometimes recopied, often hidden in sealed chambers. When the Akkadians swept through with Sargon's armies, they looted archives, but some priests spirited their treasures to remote sanctuaries in the Zabros foothills. Later, when Hammurabi's codex took center stage, these older records were deemed borderline heresy too fantastical for pragmatic law. Yet the lists persisted. In the royal tombs of yore, archaeologists uncovered cylinder seals bearing the names of kings like En-Men-Dur-Ana, said to have conversed with the gods and ascended bodily to heaven when his term ended. Rather than dying, he simply left a narrative footnote that must have caused no small amount of gossip among palace scribes. And so these sky kings carved their legacy. Longevity that dwarfed common mortality. Divine appointment that bypassed birth and death. Starlit origins pointing to a theater beyond Earth. Generations later, when the old Babylonian scribes encountered fragments of the list, they stitched them into their own chronicles, sometimes doubling, sometimes having the figures to make them seem more believable. But the smile of the game remained. The past was older and stranger than anyone dared admit. Today, you might scoop up a handful of clay fragment in the British Museum or the Louvre and marvel at the wedge marks. Beneath that, you'll find the faintest hint of a star motif or a crushed piece of obsidian evidence that someone, somewhere, recorded a truth so vast it shattered their sense of time. And as you drift back to sleep tonight, recall that sense of awe. A lineage not measured in years, but in cosmic cycles. The Earth's first true historians, mapping the rise and fall of rulers who arrived from the heavens, and reminding us that our own clocks may tick to a far bigger beat than we realize. As dawn stretched its fingers across the steppe, survivors and scribes alike cast their gaze skyward, still haunted by tales of the Watcher's ships glinting like molten metal against the firmament. But what, exactly, were these vessels? And where did they come from? To answer this, we must step beyond Earth's cradle and follow the Anunnaki back to their home, the lost world of Nibiru, and the other realms that shaped our hidden history. Nibiru, sometimes called the Crossing Planet, was more than myth. Its 3,600-year orbit carried it on a vast ellipse, swinging from distant darkness to the inner solar system. In ancient Sumerian tablets, scribes referred to it as Marduk's domain, a world once rich in resources but crippled by cosmic wear. Gold, they wrote, was the lifeblood of Nibiru's atmosphere, a shimmering dust that, when dispersed in the upper air, repaired holes in their planet's protective veil. Without it, solar radiation would strip away air and life. Imagine the desperate need. A civilization on the brink, seeking salvation in Earth's abundant gold mines. This was the Anunnaki's true mission. Not conquest, but survival. The name Anunnaki itself means those who from Anu came, linking them to the sky god Anu. They didn't think of themselves as aliens. They were exiles returning home, with Earth as a pit stop for salvation. Their leadership structure reflected that urgency. Anu, the supreme authority, sat in distant star temples. Beneath him, Enlil oversaw terrestrial affairs. And Enki, the master engineer, charted gold's extraction and distribution. Their vessels described in Akkadian epics, and even hinted at in Hindu texts as Vimanas, were marvels of celestial engineering. Sleek, metallic hulls shaped like crescent moons or elongated fish, powered by etheric reactors. They navigated by mapping the cosmic me, the divine order etched across the stars. From these ships, the Anunnaki deployed scanning instruments, probing Earth's crust for gold veins. They drilled, they dredged, and they cataloged, sending raw ingots back skyward in shimmering alchemical flares. However, their relationship with Earth's environment was fraught. In one fragmentary tablet, miners in Eridu 2 complained of air that stung like salt and fire, a side effect of godly operations. Waters near extraction sites turned brackish. Seas churned as cargo ships rose, displacing currents. Human farmers cursed the dust that settled on crops' glittering grains that rendered wheat bitter. Still, the Anunnaki pressed on, silent in their divine imperative. And as they toiled, they governed. Ziggurats became cosmic launch pads, platforms for vessels to touch down and ascend. Priestly classes watched the skies, using plano-convex stones' primitive telescopes to track Nibia's approach. Each solstice, rituals reenacted Anu's journey, complete with fire flares simulating re-entry burns. These ceremonies reinforced the bond. Without Earth's gold, Nibiru would die. Without Nibiru's guidance, Earth stewards were but upstarts. Yet all was not harmonious. Power stratified. Enlilist's followers of Enlil argued for strict control of humans as laborers. Enki's faction favored selective genetic upgrades, the creation of Adamu, proto-humans spliced with Anunnaki DNA to endure mine labor. From this genetic pool, pure humans and Nephilim emerged, reflecting the divine architect's contradictions. Beyond Nibiru lay other realms' shadowy dimensions and orbital satellites. Texts reference dark stars, cloaked worlds invisible to the naked eye, with ecosystems powered by strange energies. Some tablets hinted at a binary partner to our sun, a hidden star whose glow illuminated Nibiru's nights. Other Sumerian cylinder seals depicted astral corridors, ribbons of energy linking stars and planets, used for faster-than-light travel. Interstellar trade routes crisscrossed the heavens. The Anunnaki imported exotic materials, meteorite origin alloys, organic compounds for longevity elixirs, and crystal matrices storing data. In return, they exported knowledge, metallurgy, irrigation, writing, and temple-building techniques. Human cultures blossomed under this tutelage, yet remained tethered to their cosmic masters. Perhaps most striking is how these visitors treated time. When Nibiru receded to the outer fringes, its emissaries withdrew. Empires rose and fell, in cycles mirroring Nibiru's passage. Between visits, humans descended into forgetting, fragmenting history into myths. The biblical days of creation, the 7 ages of myth, these may reflect orbital periods, divine imprints woven into human memory. Then came a turning point. As the 3rd millennium BCE approached, Nibiru's orbit shifted, its perihelion grew more distant. Gold shipments dwindled. The Anunnaki factions clashed. Enlil, impatient for self-sufficiency, began consolidating power on Earth, erecting bureaucracies that excluded Enki's innovators. The sky became less a realm of hope and more a battleground for succession disputes written in starfire. Some left. A fleet known as the Returning Ones departed for dark stars, leaving behind residual technology sealed in hidden vaults. Others lingered, evolving into the pantheons we now dismiss as mythology, Anu as Zeus, Enlil as Jupiter, Enki as Poseidon. They recast their names to suit local tongues, yet their essence remained: gods who had walked the earth, commanded skies, and shaped humanity's destiny. Today, the relics of these otherworldly connections lie strewn across the globe. Obsidian mirrors etched with star maps in the Andes, megalithic temples aligned to solstices and equinoxes, copper scrolls buried in Dead Sea caves, their brittle surfaces inscribed with braided cuneiform and Proto-Hebrew. Each is a breadcrumb in the cosmic trail, inviting us to remember a time when Earth was one node in a galactic network. As you're drifting off, picture a night sky streaked with silent starships, cargo flares drifting like fireflies, beckoning you to look up and wonder. Remember that gold has always meant more than adornment. It was the lifeblood of worlds, the price of cosmic survival, and the golden thread weaving Earth and Nibiru together in a hidden tapestry. The sun dips low, casting long shadows over crumbling bricks as we step into the heart of ancient Mesopotamia, Babylon, where the air once thrummed with divine ambition and human hubris. Here, the blueprints of rebellion and remembrance intertwined in one towering monument, the Tower of Babel, or as the Akkadians called it, Etemenanki, the foundation of heaven and earth. Imagine a city alive with chatter in dozens of tongues. Merchants haggled over lapis lazuli and date wine in labyrinthine bazaars. Priests in flowing robes consulted star charts on stone tables. Architects sketched spiraling terraces meant to mimic the cosmic stairway to the sky. And at the city's core, artisans molded bricks of sun-baked clay, each stamped with the seal of Marduk, the patron deity who had once been Enlil, now rebranded to suit Babylon's political rise. A project began under King Nebuchadnezzar II, a ruler with a cunning mind and a flair for the dramatic. He envisioned the ziggurat not simply as a temple, but as a statement. Babylon was the new axis of heaven and earth. If the Anunnaki had touched planes of existence beyond our own, then Babylon would recreate that bridge brick by brick. Work crews of thousands laid foundation trenches, sinking wooden pilings into marshy soil. They dredged clay from the Euphrates, shaped it in wooden molds, and fired it to sun-hardened perfection. Each brick bore a cuneiform dedication. Nebuchadnezzar, beloved of Marduk, builds this for the stairway to the heavens. Under the guidance of the temple priests, the tower rose, tier upon tier, like a stepped pyramid reaching for the horizon. Yet whispers followed the tower's ascent. Older scribes spoke of a previous structure at this same site, a monument to Nibiru's return, built by a long-forgotten king. They pointed to white limestone blocks scattered at the base, remnants of a divine blueprint. These stones, carved with star maps, hinted at an earlier ziggurat that had served as a cosmic observatory during Nibiru's last perihelion. Was Nebuchadnezzar's tower truly original? Or was it a rebirth of that primeval structure? As the tower neared its zenith, strange events unfolded. Construction teams reported that at midnight, a low hum vibrated through the bricks, like a tuning fork struck by an unseen hand. Others spoke of ghostly lights pulsing along the terraces, tracing paths that corresponded to Orion and the Pleiades. One night, a sudden wind tore through the city, scattering prayer tablets and flinging scaffolding into the Euphrates. The priests debated fiercely. Some said the gods were pleased. The cosmic stairway was almost complete. Others warned that human ambition had overstepped its mortal bounds. They invoked old flood tablets, recalling how unchecked pride had once drowned the world. But Nebuchadnezzar, drunk on divine favor, dismissed these fears. He believed the tower would cement Babylon's place in history, and perhaps even coax the Anunnaki back for another celestial summit. And then it happened. On an equinox dawn, just as sunlight struck the tower's eastern face, a thunderclap shook the heavens. Many took it as applause, but the tremor deepened, and fissures appeared in the masonry hairline cracks snaking along each level. At the summit, workers felt the ground sway beneath their feet. Before long, entire sections collapsed, sending a tide of dust and rubble down the terraces. Priests yanked their robes over their faces, whispering, "The gods reclaim what is theirs." In the chaos, a council of high priests activated an emergency protocol, the confusion of tongues. Sumerian, Akkadian, early Hebrew, Elamite voices that had sung in harmony now sounded harshly dissonant. Commands were shouted and misunderstood, halting construction as teams scurried in circles. Workers who once shared jokes now clashed in anger, unable to decipher each other's words. Legend claims the Anunnaki themselves intervened. Enlil, resentful of human overreach, triggered the tower's undoing. Enki, ever the mediator, sanctioned the confusion to teach restraint rather than unleash a second flood. And so the language fracturing became a lesson. Ambition must bow to divine balance. In the days that followed, Nebuchadnezzar ordered repairs. But bricks crumbled with each attempt, and no chant or ritual could restore the lost harmony. Over time, Edamananki became a skeleton rising but never whole. Scribes etched the story onto tablets. We sought to bridge heaven and earth with mortal hands, but the echoes of eternity must remain beyond our grasp. Babylon's blueprint, however, endured not just in stories, but in cultural memory. The concept of a tower appears in myths from India's Mount Meru, described as a cosmic axis linking realms, to Nordic legends of Yggdrasil, the world tree connecting 9 worlds. In each, humans or gods strive to reach or uphold a structure that unites the celestial and the terrestrial. Architecturally, the notion of connecting earth and sky influenced temple designs across the Near East. High platforms, aligned staircases, and astronomical observatories became standard features. Even the pyramids of Egypt, though built differently, served a similar symbolic function, a pathway for pharaohs to ascend to the stars. And the linguistic fracturing? That, too, rippled beyond Babel. Indo-European languages branched, Semitic tongues diversified, and local dialects blossomed. The confusion birthed cultural diversity, but also barriers that would shape human history, politics, and connection. Tonight, as you tuck yourself in, think of that half-built tower reaching into a storm-split sky, of human hands stained with clay and dust, and of the moment when words themselves unraveled. Remember that ambition is a double-edged sword. It spawns wonders, but can unravel the threads that bind us. And somewhere, amid archaeological digs and digital reconstructions, the whisper persists. What if we could rebuild it? But perhaps some foundations are not meant to be raised again, some bridges not meant to be crossed. When the floodwaters receded and Babylon's towers lay in rubble, whispers of ancient skycraft still echoed beyond Mesopotamia's borders. Journey east across shifting sands and mountain ridges, and you'll find the subcontinent's grand tapestry, the Mahabharata, weaving in celestial wars, cosmic chariots, and battles that defied earthly imagination. Picture a camp at twilight in the heart of the ancient Kurukshetra, where armies massed under crimson skies. Warriors sharpened steel, trumpeted war horns, and recited Dharma verses. But this was more than a human conflict over land or lineage. The Mahabharata describes Vimana's flying palaces that darted like fiery comets across the heavens. Crafted from alloys known only to celestial forge masters, these crafts could vanish in clouds, cloak themselves in atmospheric currents, and discharge radiant energy capable of vaporizing entire battalions. One passage tells of Arjuna, the peerless archer, ascending in his personal Vimana to a high perch among the clouds. From there, he witnessed the Kurukshetra battlefield as one might view a map, strewn banners forming geometric patterns, armies flashing like constellations in motion. His chariot, drawn not by horses, but by multi-jointed mechanical legs, danced over terrain, leaving no mark. Piloted by Krishna and Avatar, who could straddle mortal and divine realms, it seemed to pulse with living energy. In another episode, the warrior Jayadratha deployed a sky fortress mid-battle, a floating platform where commanders studied enemy formations through crystalline viewing domes. From this vantage, they rained down Agni-astra, fire weapons said to burn in spirals and return to sender if intercepted. Witnesses claimed these spirals twisted like serpents of flame, devouring earth and spirit alike. But technology alone doesn't capture the Mahabharata's cosmic depth. Underneath the warfare lies a conversation about fate, duty, and the interplay between mortal choice and divine orchestration. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna reveals the universe's hidden gears, describing a cycle of creation and destruction, echoing Nibiru's orbit. He speaks of ages that wax and wane yugis, each spanning tens of thousands of years, during which civilizations rise under celestial influence and fall when that influence fades. The epic's narrative suggests the Vimana's pilots were not invaders but teachers, stepping into human affairs during times of moral crisis. They imparted advanced techniques, metalwork that tolerates extreme heat, medicine blending mineral and botanical extracts, and cosmic formulas that predicted eclipses centuries in advance. Yet, as in Mesopotamia, this knowledge carried a price. Misuse bred conflict, and sacred crafts turned into weapons of mass destruction. Centuries later, in temple murals across Odisha's Konark Sun Temple and Tamil Nadu's Ellora Caves, artisans depicted winged beings, multi-spoked wheels, and disc-like chariots ascending towards symbolic representations of Surya, the sun god. Some researchers argue these are stylized Vimanas, echoing the Mahabharata's descriptions with surprising fidelity. Others suggest a shared mythological vocabulary, where the sky's mysteries took shape in many tongues. Beyond stone carvings, oral traditions preserve accounts of flying devices that survived the Age of Kings. In remote Himalayan villages, elders tell of a time when Rama, another Avatar king, wielded the Pushpaka Vimana, a flying palace that could shrink to fit in a pocket or expand to ferry entire armies. Imagine boarding a wooden pavilion crowned with gold filigree, then soaring over mountain peaks as clouds brushed your feet. According to local lore, Pushpaka could reproduce itself, sending phantom duplicates to confuse pursuers and return to its owner at a word. Interwoven with these tales are the Puranas, encyclopedic texts that catalog celestial lineages and technologies. They speak of Antariksha Gana's cosmic fleets maintained by deities, each vessel maintained by teams of semi-divine artisans. Their logs detailed voyages to moons of Jupiter and floating islands adrift in astral streams, places no human should tread. One remarkable verse describes a hellish curse, unleashed when a rogue pilot fired a discharge weapon into a storm cloud. The resulting electromagnetic backlash tangled the laws of nature, sparking tempests that flattened forests and scorched plains. Survivors buried the accounts in coded allegories, warning future generations. To wield skycraft is to dance with primal forces beyond mortal control. Yet despite cautionary notes, the imprint of these crafts persisted. Medieval yogis claimed they could achieve light body flight through meditation, hinting at a spiritual analog to mechanical ascent. Early Buddhist art of the Chola dynasty shows bodhisattvas riding on glowing vahanas, vehicles that hover effortlessly, propelled by inner light. Were these expressions of internal mastery or reflections of a once shared aerospace heritage? As time marched forward, Wright brothers and jet engines eclipsed ancient lore. The Vimanas retreated into allegory, their metal lost to corrosion and cathedrals of dust. But sometimes, in high-altitude illusions known as Foo Fighters, pilots in World War II reported glowing orbs that danced alongside bombers, much like friendly cosmic escorts. In recent years, remote flight paths of Wu Apis have reignited whispers. Are we glimpsing remnants of those ancient crafts, still patrolling old trade routes between Earth and the stars? In your dreams tonight, picture the sky alive, with copper-hulled ships tracing silent arcs across fiery dawns. Pilots guided by star charts, older than our recorded history. Picture Ugni Astras spiraling in golden loops, both beautiful and terrifying. And know that these echoes from the East aren't mere fantasy. They're memories coded into our collective unconscious, waiting for the moment we dare to unpack their meaning. Night settles softly over ancient ruins, and the wind carries voices across empty courtyards, whispers of watchers who once walked among us, departed, and vowed to return. Close your eyes and imagine the hush just before dawn, when you can almost hear a distant hum, like an engine winding up after centuries of silence. It's in that moment that the promise of return takes shape, stirring hearts across forgotten hilltops and desert plains alike. Survivor legends speak of those who left by golden beams, a phrase carved in weathered stone at Hayar al-Aswad, a site shrouded in shifting sands. According to tribal elders, the Watchers ascended in triangular craft, their hulls glowing like molten mercury. When they departed, they left behind sacred groves of strange trees, whose fruit glistened with an otherworldly sheen. Every autumn, travelers claimed to taste those fruits in dreams, believing the guardians were sending a message. We watch, we wait, and we shall return. In the highlands of Anatolia, shepherds recount seeing flares in the night sky stationary points of light that pulsed in silent constance. It's like the stars have blinked, one shepherd told a wandering scribe, before sheep bolted at the thunder of his own heart. These lights were called Yildiz Bikisi, star guardians, watcher sentinels left behind to patrol Earth's edge until their masters descend once more. Meanwhile, at Göbekli Tepe, where stone pillars stand in silent vigil, archaeologists discovered spiral motifs etched deep into the limestone, a motif mirrored in Sumerian tablets to signify coming cycles of Nibiru. What if these spirals weren't merely decorative, but encoded timetables? A calendar left by those who understood celestial mechanics more intimately than any modern observatory. And there's the tale from the Nile Delta, a handful of papyrus, scroll fragments telling of a hidden fleet anchored in caves beneath sandstone cliffs. According to these fragments, the fleet's captains made a covenant. When Earth's cry grows loud with division and pride, they will return to guide or to judge. Fragments that survived millennia speak of code words whispered through generations. Return under the crimson moon. Modern archaeologists might chuckle at these stories' dusty fantasies to embellish tourism brochures. But consider the Paris Codex, a Maya manuscript depicting a winged figure surrounded by glyphs matching old world constellations. The Maya never had direct contact with Mesopotamia, yet their margin annotations include an eclipse within a 3,600-year cycle eerily similar to Nibiru's supposed period. Coincidence? Perhaps. Or perhaps it's a callback, just like you remembered the giant's roars in Section 4. The world's ancient watchmen coordinated their calendars across continents. Across South America, at Machu Picchu, stones arranged in the Intihuatana complex cast shadows at solstices that could only align if their builders knew Earth's tilt and orbit intimately. Rumor has it, local shamans still perform midnight rituals there, lighting torches to attract the watchers home. They dance in silence, their feet tracing spiral patterns on worn stones, calling in a language older than Quechuan echo of the cosmic me. Even in today's digital age, believers gather in online forums to decode star charts, matching NASA datasets with ancient star maps. They point to anomalies, triangles of light, unexplained signals, UAPs hovering near remote monoliths, and see signs that the watchers are returning in subtle waves. A meme appears. When they come back, don't forget to offer snacks. It's a gentle joke, but beneath it lies earnest hope. Yet not all anticipate a benevolent return. In some corners, fear grips imaginations. What if they come back and we haven't earned their trust? If their first visit disrupted Earth's balance, what might their second visit herald salvation or reckoning? In the Quranic names of Yekuk and Mekuk, Gog and Magog appear as harbingers of chaos, unleashed from sealed valleys when the time is right. Are they Watcher's renegade descendants, coiled and waiting, ready to flood the world once more? But let's soften that thought with a light chuckle. Imagine the Watchers, peeking down at our global traffic jams and TikTok dances, shaking their heads and whispering among themselves. They're still figuring out the internet? We need to send help. It's a gentle reminder that even cosmic custodians might have a sense of humor about our small but persistent humanity. Some traditions blend hope with ritual. In remote New Guinea villages, tribes paint their faces with spirals and gather under banyan trees to sing old lullabies. They believe the Watcher's return depends on rekindling ancestral echoes, stories told at hearths, songs composed by moonlight. It's as if each memory whispered by grandmothers is an invitation card, stamped with names lost to time. So tonight, as you settle under your blanket, consider lighting a small lamp by your window. Whisper a simple invitation. Guardians of old, if you still watch, guide us kindly. Whether you believe it literally or not, it's a chance to join the chorus of voices across millennia, each calling out in hope and wonder. Because the promise remains suspended in the night sky, like those distant flares shepherds saw long ago, silent, patient, and unfaltering. And somewhere, beyond our sight, the Watchers linger waiting for Earth's true moment of need, ready to return and shape the next cycle of our shared story. As dawn filters through your window, let's turn our gaze inward to the deepest roots of humanity, the hidden legacies sown by those forbidden unions, the seeds or tones that carried secret power across generations. Picture a quiet valley where farmers rise before the sun, guiding oxen through dew-laced fields. Unseen by most, the furrows they plow follow an ancient pattern, a spiral that echoes the celestial cycles and the genetic spiral woven by the Watchers themselves. In the wake of the flood and the giant's fall, a handful of divine human lineages persisted. These branches of the family tree carried more than just mortal blood. They carried fragments of celestial essence, a spark of the Watcher's intellect, a touch of their longevity, and a whisper of their unearthly vision. Some called these descendants heroes, others demigods. But beneath the legends lay a biological truth, a selective grafting of Anunnaki traits onto human stock. Consider the line of Enoch, later immortalized in Hebrew lore as the seventh patriarch who walked with God. The Book of Jubilees and apocryphal texts elaborate that Enoch's children, Methuselah, Lamech, and their kin inherited not only long life, but predispositions toward arcane arts, astrology, alchemy, and language of the stars. Methuselah, for example, is said to have decoded the heavens' rhythms, teaching early astronomers to chart the planets' paths with precision unmatched for millennia. His name became synonymous with wisdom, aged like a rare wine, valuable, potent, and laced with complexity. Then there's the Egyptian legend of Osiris, whose resurrection myth hints at a divine inheritance. While mainstream readings frame it as spiritual allegory, some scholars suggest Osiris's regenerative power represents knowledge of advanced biology, perhaps the Watchers, medical techniques that could restart failing organs. His son Horus, bearing the falcon-headed visage, symbolizes a lineage carrying keen vision, both literal and figurative, teaching pharaohs to see beyond mere territory and into the ethics of rulership. Crossing to the Greek world, the story of Perseus, child of Dano and Zeus, introduces another Taham motif. Zeus, disguised as golden rain, impregnates Dano gold, the very element the Anunnaki mined to save their world. Perseus's birth from a shower of gold could be more than poetic. It might encode a memory of genetic transmission rituals involving gold-infused elixirs meant to catalyze divine human conception. And like many Tahom carriers, Perseus grows to perform feats beyond human capacity, slaying Medusa, taming Pegasus, and rescuing Andromeda from the sea monster, a symbolic rescue from the very waters that once erased his ancestors. In the Indian subcontinent, the Mahabharata again offers clues. The hero Karna, born to the maiden Kunti by the sun god Surya, exhibits extraordinary martial prowess and radiant beauty. His skin, described as golden, and his natural armor hint at a Tahom deeply entwined with soul, perhaps Anu's energy. Karna's tragic fate, ostracized, despite his gifts, mirrors the burden many Tahom descendants bore, blessed with divine traits, yet alienated from the wider human community. Moving north, Norse myths recount Loki's complex lineage. Though often cast as mischief maker, hidden in his blood runs a stream of celestial heritage. His children, Fenrir and Jormungandr, personify forces that span worlds. And Odin's own offspring, valued for wisdom and sovereignty, continue the pattern, a Tahom of divine strategies and runic knowledge passed through family lines. Even in the Americas, Incan rulers claimed descent from Inti, the sun god, tracing a Tahom that legitimized imperial authority. Their gold artifacts, sun discs, masks, and temples weren't merely decorative. They were genealogical markers, signifying a tangible connection to an Anunnaki-like celestial patron. Each ruler underwent rituals that mixed gold dust with ceremonial blood, symbolizing the merging of mortal and divine essences. Throughout Africa, the Dogon people's knowledge of Sirius's orbital companions, stars invisible without telescopes, suggests an oral tradition seeded by ancient watchers. Their ritual masks and totemic carvings encode star maps, and their legends of the Namo, amphibious beings who taught them astronomy, align uncannily with global motifs of returnees bearing cosmic gifts. All these threads weave a tapestry of Tahom seeds of divinity grafted onto human stems. And with each generation, those seeds branched, some flourishing in royal courts, others blossoming in obscure villages. The descendants often carried marked talismans, signet rings depicting star-crossed symbols, pendants shaped like spiral galaxies, or talc-infused amulets rumored to enhance mental acuity. Yet the potency of the Tahom came with price. Carriers struggled with restless dreams, glimpsing star paths, and unanswered questions. They felt the pull of ancestral homes beyond Earth, longing for a world they had never seen yet, somehow remembered. Some withdrew into monastic orders, seeking solace in prayer rather than prophecy. Others turned to hermetic magic, forging grimoires filled with glyphs that promised communion with the Watchers. Over centuries, many Tahom lines intermarried with ordinary families, diluting their celestial inheritance. Their extraordinary gifts became mere eccentricities, an uncanny intuition here, an unusual longevity there. Mythic heroes faded into saints, tricksters, and folk sages. But pockets of pure Tahom persisted, guarded by secret societies like the Magi, the Brahmins, and the Sufi mystics, each guarding fragments of the original blueprint. In rural Anatolia, a village still celebrates the Tahom festival each spring. They plant seeds in shapes of spirals and stars, offering a silent nod to the Watchers and their own hidden lineage. Farmers leave small gold leaf tokens and hand-carved furrows gifts to the earth that echo the ancient pact. We carry your seeds. May you nourish ours. Today, when we glance at family trees, we see branching lines of names and dates. But imagine if, woven between those lines, ran a second thread in a radiant and nearly invisible, carrying an echo of the stars, a whisper of a time when Earth's destiny was shared with beings from beyond. That is the true Tahom of humanity, a legacy of hidden genes and deeper stories, waiting in our DNA to bloom once more. So as you drift towards sleep, smooth your palms over your blankets like you would gentle soil. Imagine the seeds planted within you by distant ancestors' tiny carriers of cosmic memory. Know that you are part of an ancient experiment, a living bridge between Earth and the stars. And remember, every heartbeat carries a pulse of that Taham, a soft reminder that we are more than we seem, roots reaching into the infinite. Night deepens, and our path winds toward a singular figure whose influence spans continents and epochs, the Hidden Queen, known as Lilith, Ishtar, Zur, and by many other names. Though she shifts her form, her essence remains the same. A feminine force born of the Watchers, intertwined with human fate, a siren who stole seeds and reshaped destinies. Imagine being a traveler on a moonlit desert highway. A cool breeze stirs sand across your boots. Out of the darkness steps a woman, dark hair, cascading like spilled ink, eyes glinting with mischief and ancient knowledge. She greets you not with words, but with a soft hum, a melody older than any mortal song, weaving itself into your mind. This encounter, whether real or dreamed, marks those who will carry her legacy. In the earliest Akkadian myths, she appears as Inanna, goddess of love and war, daughter of the moon god, twin of Utu, the sun. Inanna's descent to the underworld, where she is stripped of her regalia, imprisoned, and then reborn parallels the Watcher's own fall and the Flood's purge. She knows power and vulnerability, seduction and sacrifice. Teaching initiates the paradox of creation. To build anew, one must first let the old self die. Across the waters of Babylon, she is Ishtar, a stern deity commanding armies and granting kings their thrones. In hymns, she rides chariots drawn by lions, her weapons tipped with divine rage. Yet in taverns, her name evokes whispered deals. Ishtar's blessing can make a barren field fertile or plunge a city into madness. To worship her is to dance on the edge of chaos and order, much as the gold-seeking Anunnaki balanced creation and destruction. In Arab lore, she becomes Zur, the morning star itself. Two angels, Harit and Marut, fall for her beauty, sacrificing their divine immunity. Their tale reminds us that desire is both gateway and trap. It awakens hidden power, but can unmake even the most steadfast. Zur's lesson? If the Watchers taught humans to use power, she taught them the peril of longing for what's forbidden. And then there is Lilith, whispered in the dark corners of Jewish mysticism. The first wife of Adam, so some say, who fled Eden rather than submit. She embraces autonomy, motherhood of spirits, and the wild places beyond human law. In Kabbalistic texts, Lilith is both demon and liberator, nursing the disembodied souls of aborted children, but also granting strength to women in labor. Her night-roaming army of spirits mirrors the Jinn's hidden legions, the companions of the Watchers who never fully vanished after the fall. What ties these avatars together is a cult of the Hidden Queen, secret societies that preserved her mysteries through coded symbols and midnight ceremonies. They used poppies and mandrake to induce trance states, amber to anchor their visions, and blood rituals to mark initiates. Temples carved into cliffs house reliefs of a goddess with feline hips and avian eyes, reminder that the divine feminine transcends human form. In one such hidden sanctuary near Göbekli Tepe, archaeologists uncovered ivory plaques depicting a winged figure kneeling before a spiral column. Adjacent pillars bear scratched symbols, L-shaped glyphs said to stand for Lil, night, and arrow-like signs hinting at her role as both protector and predator. The spiral echoes motifs in Sumerian tablets, linking Lilith's cult directly to the Watcher's earliest followers. In India, the Shakta Tantras revere a goddess named Kali, whose ravenous dance devours worlds before birthing new ones. Scholars note striking parallels between Kali's wild energy and Lilith's nocturnal sovereignty. Both shatter boundaries and summon primal forces. Initiation rites involve spinning in circles, chanting names of power, and calling down lightning-like energy into the initiate's spine. It's a ritual echo of Lilith's whisper, a baptism in raw, untamed power. Jewish mystical circles preserved Lilith through amulets, bearing her seal, a stylized crescent moon cradling a coiled serpent. These talismans, small enough to hide beneath a child's pillow, were said to ward off malevolent spirits, but also to unlock the bearer's latent gifts, heightened intuition, lucid dreams, and an uncanny magnetism. But the deal always carried a warning. Beware the price of the knight's favor. Throughout medieval Europe, Lilith morphed into Lilichu, a vampiric spirit in the lore of Mesopotamian immigrants. She haunted city streets, seducing unwary travelers and draining life force under the pretense of passion. Broadsheets depicted her with clawed feet and bat-like wings, accompanied by 333 spawn, an echo of the Watchers, 200 fallen leaders multiplied by human generations. These depictions served as cautionary tales. Power granted by the hidden queen must be tempered, or it consumes both giver and receiver. Yet, worship persisted in secret covens. Under candlelit oaks in Europe's deep forests, practitioners carved spiral sigils into bark, sang invocations in archaic tongues, and drank herbal infusions that blurred the veil between worlds. They believed Lilith's children lived among them, artists touched by madness, poets glimpsing the void between stars, prophets speaking truths both wondrous and terrible. In modern times, Lilith's cult has found online refuges. Digital altars appear on forums, where users share photos of hand-drawn sigils alongside selfies drenched in red light. Common tags include hashtag Queen of Shadows and hashtag Seed of Stars, signifying both reverence and a claim to hidden heritage. In whispered threads, they debate whether Lilith's return heralds empowerment or reckoning, and whether the hidden queen's children walk unnoticed among us, our neighbors, colleagues, or maybe even ourselves. But what does this mean for our bedtime tale? It means that beneath every myth of giants and gods, there flows a feminine current of power, one that both nourishes growth and unleashes chaos. The hidden queen reminds us that creation and destruction spring from the same womb, that knowledge without compassion can become a weapon, and that the deepest secrets often wear the guise of beauty. So as you drift toward sleep, sense the gentle sway of Lilith's spiral in your bones. Feel Zur's hum in your heartbeat, and let Ishtar's fierce grace lull your consciousness. For she is the living thread that binds human and divine, shadow and light, the star-born watchers and the soil-bound dreamers. And remember, in the hush of night, the hidden queen watches, and her promise remains unbroken. The seeds she planted will bloom once more, in ways we can scarcely imagine. A hush descends as we step onto the gently sloping mound of Göbekli Tepe, where dawn slithers through carved pillars like fingers of ancient memory, stroking our modern curiosity. Feel the cool limestone beneath your fingertips, worn smooth by millennia of hidden rituals. Here, under layers of earth and time, lie the remains of a complex older than Stonehenge by thousands of years, a time capsule not of funerary goods, but of cosmic secrets. Imagine the first excavators brushing away packed soil to reveal T-shaped pillars, some towering over 4 meters tall, each carved with reliefs of foxes, scorpions, and abstract spirals. Those spirals, remember from section 11? They pulse here like coded diaries, signaling planetary cycles and cosmic returns. One pillar, dubbed the Spiral Messenger, bears a double helix motif that mirrors the Taham seed patterns we discussed in section 12 and Echo of genetic and celestial spirals intertwined. But Göbekli Tepe's true enigma lies in its deliberate burial. After centuries of ceremonies, those massive megaliths were carefully stacked and covered with soil. No sudden collapse, no ruinous conquest, just a methodical, respectful entombment. Think of a family sealing away a cherished album to preserve it intact, knowing that someday distant descendants would unearth it and rediscover their roots. Did its builders foresee a future eager enough to receive their message? Scholars have debated the reason. Some suggest a catastrophic event prompted the burial of flood too local to register in flood tablets, but mighty enough to seal the site. Others propose an intentional archive ritual, mistrusting that future generations might misuse the sacred knowledge if left exposed. In that sense, Göbekli Tepe functions as both temple and time lock, guarding teachings too powerful for an unready world. Under the layer of dirt lies a grid of halls, each marking a phase of cosmic understanding. In Pillar Circle B, reliefs depict what appear to be binary star systems, two circles linked by a bar, reminiscent of instructions for navigating between suns. Nearby, an engraving shows concentric rings with a dot offset from center, a schematic that could represent an elliptical orbit, perhaps Nibiru's path sketched in stone for those who understood its cycle. Beneath our boots, echoes of chants might linger. Participants, draped in animal skins scented with frankincense, likely circled these pillars at solstices, aligning their steps with starlight patterns. They may have chanted names of Anu, Enki, and the hidden queen like Lilith, weaving incantations that tapped into the spiritual currents running beneath the earth's crust. Each ceremony would imprint the site with both stone and story, layering meaning until the very bedrock hummed with cosmic resonance. One chamber, now sealed beneath a mound, is called the Vault of Whispers. Here, slender grooves in the floor suggest that wooden panels once covered the walls, each panel inscribed with symbols too delicate to carve in stone. Researchers speculate these panels recorded more intimate teachings, formulas for celestial communication, birthrights for Tauhum carriers, and prophecies of Nibiru's next approach. The vault's ceiling likely aimed to keep these fragile records safe from rain, wind, and prying eyes. As the Earth warmed after the last ice age, Göbekli Tepe's creators likely understood that the rising seasons would eventually blur memories of their work, so they chose burial over abandonment, preserving their legacy for a chosen moment when humanity would have the tools and the will to unlock it. And now, after 10,000 years, that moment may be at hand. Archaeologists scraping back time, digital scans revealing engraved details invisible to the naked eye, algorithms reconstructing shattered glyphs. Yet despite high-tech probes, much remains stubbornly obscure. Some reliefs defy translation. Hybrid creatures that combine mammal, bird, and reptile features, perhaps symbolic encodings of interspecies alliances from the Watcher's era. Others show figures with raised hands and blank faces, akin to the faceless gods we saw in Section 1 Guardians, who taught respect through absence rather than display. The site's location itself speaks volumes. Perched atop a hill overlooking rich plains, Göbekli Tepe was both sanctuary and observatory. From its highest mounds, watchers could track solstices and equinoxes, but they could also monitor the same plains where Eridu II once stood, linking the world's first city to this primal temple. It's as if the watchers wanted to maintain a network of cosmic lighthouses, each pointing toward the next in a long chain of hidden posts. In evening light, shadows cast by the pillars form labyrinthine patterns on the tiled floors, a silent map to traverse in meditation. Visitors today whisper of a palpable stillness, as if the ground remembers every footstep taken in ancient rites. You might close your eyes and, for a heartbeat, catch a glimpse of flares ascending into the sky phantom vessels, returning to touch down before disappearing in a swirl of dust. Local legends add further layers. Shepherds tell of a silver door somewhere on the eastern terraces, a low archway sealed with polished limestone. Beneath, they say, lie wooden chests bound with copper clasps, containing scrolls woven from woven reeds and gold threads. Attempts to excavate that chamber ended suddenly, as if met with invisible resistance. Tools dulled inexplicably, workers felt overwhelming vertigo, and dogs refused to approach. The door remains unopened, a final gesture of respect or fear, assuring that some secrets must wait longer. As modern lights blink on in nearby villages, The ancient site stands quiet, its message shifting from stone to soul. Göbekli Tepe whispers that our history is not a single line, but a spiral of revelations, each layer buried, then uncovered, then reborn. Its purpose, whether temple, archive, or cosmic warning, remains partly veiled, yet it urges us to listen. Tomorrow, dust will settle, and tourists will stream in, cameras clicking like cicadas. But for now, let silence ring. Feel the limestone's coolness in your palm. Hear the hollow echo when you tap a pillar. Imagine the watchers gathering here, chanting under star-strewn skies, sealing away knowledge until a time when humanity could handle its weight. And as you slip back beneath your covers tonight, let Göbekli Tepe's secret hum lull you, an ancient lullaby of buried wisdom, cosmic cycles, and waiting vessels. For buried deep in that mound lies not just stone, but the promise of revelation, waiting for the world to be ready once more. The stars have shifted, the stories layered like stone upon stone, and now we arrive at the final curve of our winding journey, the part where everything folds inward, where every whisper, every glyph, every flash of gold in ancient texts draws a red thread to one singular question. Was all of this leading to now? Look around at our modern world. A maze of glowing screens, traffic-clogged cities, and scientific marvels we scarcely understand. Satellites orbit above like artificial watchers, and deep beneath the earth, fiber optic veins pulse with thought and data. We call ourselves the apex of civilization. But buried beneath our concrete and convenience is something older than pride and yearning. Every great civilization, from the stepped pyramids of Mesoamerica to the monoliths of Easter Island, seems to reach upward. What were they reaching for, really? A god? A memory? Or a signal? Maybe what they truly sought was connection, a reconnection, with something lost in the flood of forgetting. Throughout this tale, we've circled that forgetting, but it was never total. It left fossils in stone, coded in ziggurat steps, in pillar shadows, in myths retold beside firelight. We didn't erase the old world. We buried it in metaphor. We translated the technology into theology, the sky maps into poetry. The watchers became gods, their ships became flaming chariots, and their cities turned into heavens or hells. And the strangest part? We're starting to remember. Our science now peers into the DNA spiral and sees echoes of deliberate intervention, chunks of genetic code that don't quite fit the evolutionary narrative. Astronomers discover rogue planets with odd orbits. Physicists whisper of multiverses and ancient energy signatures. Even our dreams are shifting, more vivid, more ancient, filled with symbols that feel both foreign and oddly familiar. Could it be the Watcher's time capsule is beginning to open? There are reports strange flickers in the sky, underwater ruins in the Caribbean, unexplained structures under Antarctica's ice. Data leaks hint at classified digs revealing gigantic skeletal remains, not fossils, but humanoid forms 30 feet long. Whistleblowers speak of vaults unearthed in Iraq and Turkey, containing scrolls wrapped in gold leaf, written in cuneiform that no modern scholar dares to publish. One even claimed the scrolls glowed softly when touched by those of certain bloodlines. Yes, bloodlines. The Taham, remember? The seeds. They weren't just biological. They were mnemonic, designed to awaken when the world hit the right frequency. Again, perhaps no. Perhaps here, the modern world is caught in paradox. We're more connected than ever, and yet more fragmented. We chase gods and quantum revelations, while our ancient memory gently tugs at our feet from beneath museum cases and forest soil. The same dreams emerge across continents, of spirals, of fire in the sky, of those who taught us once and said they'd return. And they might, because all roads, it seems, lead here. To now, a civilization on the edge of rediscovery. We've mapped the genome, cracked the atom, and are now mapping memory itself through archives, archaeology, and ancestral tales. But will we listen? Or will we fall again, as Babel did undone not by gods, but by our own pride? Will we misuse the knowledge the way the giants did, bending it into war and dominion? Or will we finally understand what the Watchers failed to? That knowledge must walk hand in hand with humility? This story you've heard across deserts, stars, floods, and thrones. It doesn't end in mystery. It ends in invitation. You are part of it now. When you look up at the night sky tomorrow, let it be different. Don't see stars, see memory. See a roadmap carved in light, a promise kept in orbit, a story still unfolding. Maybe you carry a Tom spark. Maybe your dreams hum with spirals. Maybe you're the one meant to find the next pillar buried beneath the hills. And if the Watchers return, or reveal themselves in our own blood and breath, perhaps the question isn't will they come back, but rather were they ever really gone? So now, let's slow the pace. Let the stars fade to gentle mist. Let Göbekli Tepe's carved stone pillars recede into the soil again, and let the ships in the sky dim their golden glow. You've wandered through a long tale tonight, one of fire and flood, of giants and star teachers, of sacred temples and spiral seeds passed quietly through human veins. And whether you take it as truth or legend, fact or fantastic metaphor, one thing remains: the longing to remember. You are a part of something vast, not just a storybook reader, not just a dreamer under the covers, but someone who still carries a sliver of starlight in their bones, a whisper of ancient thunder in your blood. You are the descendant of the ones who survived, the ones who listened, the ones who chose to pass the story on by word, by stone, by seed. So breathe. Let the weight of these old memories settle into your chest like warm sand. Let your heart beat slow, like the thrum of ships long gone. Let your breath match the rhythm of waves washing over forgotten shores. You are safe. The Watchers are not here to harm. They are not shadows behind the stars. They are echoes within you, waiting for the moment you remember their names. And you don't need to rush. History waits patiently. The past doesn't mind being unearthed gently. Now rest. You've wandered far tonight. Let your thoughts drift with the spirals. Let the stories fade to mist. Let sleep take you softly. Good night, ancient soul.